What if your family's secret recipe was the only thing keeping you off the streets? For one struggling pastry chef in Portland, a bizarre corporate buyout saved her business. But her billionaire investor didn't want her profits. He craved a very specific craving, and the truth defies human logic. Records from the Multnomah County Courthouse show Harper Quinn was exactly 72 hours away from total bankruptcy. Anyone who has ever worked in food service knows the suffocating weight of a failing restaurant, but Harper's situation was uniquely devastating. She had poured her entire life savings, plus a massive small business loan from U.S. Bank, into Quinn's Confections, a rustic bakery located on NW 10th Avenue in Portland's Pearl District. By October, the cloudy, relentless Oregon rain seemed to mirror her financial reality. She was 90 days past due on her lease. Her commercial Hobart mixer was making a terrifying grinding noise, and her primary supplier, Charlie's Produce, had officially cut off her credit line. Landlord Gregory Hastings had already slid the eviction warning under her door. Harper was done. She was packing up her copper mixing bowls, preparing to surrender her dream. But Harper had one remaining asset, though she didn't know its true value at the time. It was her late grandmother's signature strawberry tart. This wasn't your standard sugary bakery window pastry. The recipe was an oddity passed down from her grandmother, who grew up in an isolated mineral mining town in rural Pennsylvania. The jam required a grueling, highly specific process: wild Oregon strawberries, slow reduced in a copper pot, splashed with a sharp, dark cherry balsamic vinegar, and spiked with a microscopic pinch of food-grade iron powder. Her grandmother had originally added the iron as a folk remedy for anemia, but it gave the jam a bizarre, heavy, almost metallic tang that perfectly cut through the sweetness of the fruit. Customers either hated it or were fanatically addicted to it. On a dreary Tuesday afternoon, just as Harper was flipping the open sign to closed for what she thought would be the last time a man walked in. Security footage from the shop, later analyzed by private investigators, shows a towering figure stepping out of the torrential rain without a single drop of water on his immaculate charcoal Tom Ford suit. He was pale, startlingly so, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes that seemed to absorb the dim light of the bakery rather than reflect it. "We're closing," Harper told him, wiping flour from her apron. "Actually, we're closing for good." The man didn't blink. He walked directly to the display case, pointing a long, pale finger at the single remaining strawberry tart sitting on the glass shelf. "I require that," he said. His voice was smooth, resonant, and carried a strange, archaic cadence. Too exhausted to argue, Harper boxed it up. She didn't even charge him. She just wanted him out so she could cry in the walk-in freezer. But instead of leaving, the man opened the box right there at the counter. He picked up the pastry, closed his eyes, and took a bite. What the security cameras captured next is something behavioral experts still debate. The man literally froze. His chest stopped moving. His pupils dilated so rapidly his eyes appeared entirely black. A violent tremor ran through his hand, and he gripped the edge of the granite counter hard enough to leave a micro-fracture in the stone. He didn't just chew the pastry, he devoured it with a sudden, terrifying desperation, as if he had been starving in a desert for a century and had just found a canteen of water. He swallowed, opening his eyes. They were fixed dead on Harper. "What is in this?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. Harper, terrified, rattled off the basic ingredients, carefully omitting the iron powder and the copper pot reduction technique. The man pulled a sleek black card from his breast pocket and slid it across the counter. The name, embossed in silver, read Cassian Mercer, CEO, Mercer Vanguard. "I am buying this establishment," Cassian announced flatly. Harper laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. "It's not for sale, it's bankrupt. I'm over 150,000 in debt." "I am aware," Cassian replied, pulling out a slim cell phone. He dialed a number, spoke exactly 3 words. "Execute the Quinn acquisition," and hung up. He looked back at her. "Your debts to U.S. Bank are cleared. Your lease with Mr. Hastings has been purchased. I am now your landlord. I am injecting $1.2 million into the operating budget of this bakery. You will remain the head chef." Harper thought it was a sick joke, but within 3 minutes her phone buzzed. It was an alert from her banking app. A wire transfer for $1.2 million had just cleared into her business account. Her jaw dropped. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, looking at the impossibly pale billionaire standing in her failing shop. Cassian leaned in his breath, unnaturally cold against her skin. "I want you to make that exact jam. And I want you to never ever change the recipe. When you are drowning in debt, you don't ask why the life raft is made of gold." Harper signed the acquisition papers 2 days later in the sleek, sterile offices of Lane Powell, a prominent Pacific Northwest law firm. But it wasn't until she sat down to read the heavily modified employment contract that the bizarre reality of her new life set in. Cassian Mercer didn't care about foot traffic. He didn't care about marketing or expanding the menu or Yelp reviews. In fact, under Section 4 of the new contract, Quinn's Confections was to immediately cease all daytime retail operations. The storefront was to be permanently shuttered to the public. Instead, Harper was given a base salary of $250,000 a year to do one thing: bake 40 exact replicas of the strawberry tart every single night between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. This is money laundering. Her best friend and former sous chef Chloe Bennett warned her over coffee a week later. Chloe ran a popular food truck off Mississippi Avenue and had seen her fair share of shady Portland restaurant deals. Harper, think about it. A ghost corporation buys a failing bakery, boards up the windows, and pays you a tech CEO's salary to bake jam in the middle of the night. You're a front for a cartel. Harper defended the arrangement. "Chloe, the money is real. The bank cleared it. And the guy, he's just an eccentric billionaire with a weird fixation on my grandmother's recipe. I bake the tarts, I put them in the industrial fridge at 3:45 a.m., and I go home. It's harmless." But it didn't feel harmless. Working the night shift in an empty, locked bakery cast a heavy, isolating shadow over Harper's life. Every night, exactly at 4:15 a.m., a matte black Mercedes Sprinter van would pull into the alleyway behind the shop. Cassian's personal fixer, a quiet, intensely intimidating man named Desmond Reed, would unlock the back door, load the 40 tarts into a refrigerated lockbox, nod silently to Harper, and drive away. Weeks turned into months. Harper's bank account swelled, but her anxiety spiked. She began noticing strange details. Desmond never wore a winter coat, despite the freezing December Portland rain. The ingredient requests from Mercer Vanguard were militant. If Harper tried to substitute a standard balsamic for the dark cherry, or used a stainless steel pot instead of the heavily oxidized copper one, she would receive a terrifyingly swift email from Desmond within hours stating the batch was unacceptable and reminding her of her contractual obligations. How did they know? She wondered. How could they taste the difference of a metal pan? The turning point happened on a bitter night in mid-January. A massive ice storm had rolled off the Columbia River Gorge, effectively shutting down the city. Harper had just finished boxing the 40 tarts at 3:30 a.m. when her cell phone rang. It was Desmond. "The Sprinter has a blown transmission on Interstate 5. Desmond said, his voice tense background, wind howling through the receiver. "I cannot make the pickup. Mr. Mercer requires the product immediately. He is experiencing a severe deficit." "A deficit?" Harper asked, confused. "Desmond, the roads are completely iced over. Can't he just wait until tomorrow?" "No," Desmond barked, losing his icy composure for the first time. "If he does not get that specific batch in the next hour, people are going to get hurt. I am authorizing a bonus of $50,000 to your account. Put the boxes in your Subaru and drive them to the Benson Tower penthouse. Use the private freight elevator. The code is 0404. Do not speak to him. Drop them and leave." The line went dead. Harper's heart hammered against her ribs. People are going to get hurt over pastry. Chloe's warnings about drug cartels rang fiercely in her head, but the threat in Desmond's voice was too real to ignore. Loading the heavy boxes into the back of her all-wheel drive Outback, she navigated the treacherous empty streets of downtown Portland. The city was a ghost town encased in a shimmering layer of ice. She arrived at the luxury high-rise Benson Tower at exactly 4:05 a.m. Following Desmond's instructions, she bypassed the main lobby and used the underground parking garage to access the freight elevator. She punched in Mortau 404. The elevator surged upward, entirely bypassing the lower residential floors, rocketing straight to the top. When the metal doors slid open, Harper stepped into a penthouse that looked less like a home and more like a high-end mausoleum. Black marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the frozen city, and virtually no furniture. But what struck her immediately was the temperature. It was freezing inside. The climate control was set to a chilling 45 degrees. "Mr. Mercer," Harper called out softly, holding a large crate of tarts against her chest. No answer. Only a strange, wet tearing sound coming from the adjacent dining hall. Harper crept forward, her boots completely silent on the marble. As she neared the archway, she heard a man sobbing quietly. It wasn't Cassian. It sounded like a young man pleading. "Please, Cassian, no. I signed the NDA. You promised." "I am losing it," Cassian's voice growled. It didn't sound like the suave CEO who had bought her shop. It sounded guttural, distorted, like two stones grinding together. "The iron. I need the iron." Harper peeked around the corner, and the crate of tarts nearly slipped from her numb fingers. Cassian Mercer was pinning a young, terrified security guard against the dining room wall. But Cassian was transformed. His flawless face was contorted, the skin pulled taut over unnaturally sharp cheekbones. His eyes were glowing a sickening luminescent crimson in the dark room, and extending from his upper jaw were two elongated, razor-sharp fangs dripping with a thin, clear venom. Cassian lunged his jaw, unhinging, to sink his teeth into the guard's exposed neck. Clatter! Harper stumbled back, knocking a silver decorative vase off a pedestal. It crashed against the marble floor with a deafening ring. Cassian froze. His head snapped toward the archway with whiplash speed. His crimson eyes locked onto Harper, zeroing in on the cardboard crate in her hands. He dropped the sobbing security guard, who instantly scrambled away into the shadows. For a terrifying second, Harper thought she was going to die. The creature that used to be a billionaire investor stalked toward her, a low, predatory hiss vibrating in his chest. But as he closed the distance, the heavy metallic, iron-rich scent of the strawberry jam wafted from the crate. Cassian stopped violently. His chest heaved. With blinding speed, he reached into the box, pulled out a tart, and shoved it into his mouth. Harper watched in paralyzed horror as the bizarre chemistry of her grandmother's recipe went to work. The heavy iron powder, the sharp, dark cherry vinegar, the metallic reduction from the copper pot, it hit his system like a narcotic. The glowing crimson faded from his eyes, returning to a dull, empty black. His fangs retracted with a sickening crunch. The demonic tension in his muscles dissolved. Within 10 seconds, Cassian Mercer stood before her, wiping a smear of red jam from his pale lips with a silk handkerchief. He straightened his Tom Ford lapels. "You're late, Miss Quinn," he whispered, his voice smooth and human once again. Harper dropped her car keys on the ice-cold floor. She had just realized why Cassian Mercer bought her failing bakery. He wasn't laundering money. He was an apex predator, and her grandmother's iron-laced strawberry jam was the only thing on earth that tasted exactly like human blood. Fear is a strange mechanism. When pushed past its absolute limit, the human brain stops panicking and shifts into a chilling, hyper-rational survival mode. Harper did not scream. She did not run for the private elevator. She simply stared at the empty pastry box, then at the billionaire who had just narrowly avoided tearing a man's throat out. "You're not laundering money," Harper stated, her voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "You're feeding." Cassian walked to the panoramic window overlooking the frozen Willamette River. The monstrous feral energy that had consumed him moments ago was entirely gone, replaced by the weary demeanor of a corporate executive working an 80-hour week. Since the implementation of widespread genetic genealogy and advanced forensic science, my kind has faced an extinction-level logistical crisis, Cassian explained, not looking at her. In the 19th century, a missing person in the Pacific Northwest was attributed to a bear attack or harsh winters. Today, a single drop of saliva left at a crime scene is uploaded to CODIS, and within 48 hours the FBI is tracking our movements. We cannot hunt. We cannot survive in the modern surveillance state. He turned to face her, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. For the last decade, my syndicate has relied on embezzling expired blood bags from the Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU blood bank. It was highly risky and wildly expensive. But then Desmond intercepted a rumor about a struggling bakery in the Pearl District. A local food critic had described your grandmother's tart as having a disturbingly metallic, coppery finish. I investigated. I took a bite. Cassian stepped closer. Your grandmother did not invent a pastry, Miss Quinn. She reverse-engineered a chemical illusion. He walked over to a sleek glass whiteboard on the far wall and picked up a dry erase marker. To Harper's bewilderment, the billionaire vampire began sketching a chemical compound. True sustenance for us relies on the oxidization of iron within the human bloodstream, Cassian murmured, drawing the molecular structure of hemoglobin binding with oxygen. Standard human biology dictates this process. HB plus 4002, right left harpoons. HbO2 was for Dulalar. What your grandmother created through the slow reduction of wild strawberries in a heavily oxidized copper pot, combined with the extreme acidity of dark cherry balsamic and raw iron powder, is a synthetic mimicry. The tart tricks our biological receptors. It satisfies the deficit without a single drop of human blood. Harper realized the sheer magnitude of what she held. She wasn't just a baker. She was the sole manufacturer of a synthetic cure for a hidden predatory species. If this is a cure, why keep it a secret? Harper asked. Why just buy my shop? Why not mass-produce it? Because, a new sharp voice echoed from the private elevator bank. Not everyone wants to eat pastry, Harper. Desmond stepped into the penthouse. He was bleeding from a deep laceration above his left eye, his usually immaculate suit torn at the shoulder. He wasn't a vampire, Harper realized. He was human, a heavily armed fixer. And he looked terrified. "We have a breach!" Desmond gasped, leaning against the marble wall. "Apex Biomedical. They intercepted the Sprinter van on Interstate 5. It wasn't the ice that blew the transmission. It was a targeted EMP device. Sebastian Graves knows about the bakery." Cassian's expression turned lethal. "Graves?" Desmond looked at Harper with grim intensity. "Sebastian Graves runs a rival faction. They are purists. They believe that adapting to human society is a weakness, and they have been aggressively pushing for a violent uprising against the modern world. If Cassian's syndicate transitions to your synthetic food source, Graves loses all political leverage over the ruling council. Graves doesn't want to steal the recipe." Cassian said, his fangs subtly elongating again as anger spiked his adrenaline. "He wants to destroy the manufacturer." Harper's phone buzzed in her pocket. The caller ID flashed a number she knew all too well. It was Chloe Bennett, her best friend. With trembling fingers, Harper answered. "Chloe." "Harper," a man's voice replied. It was smooth-cultured and laced with absolute malice. "Your friend makes a very mediocre pulled pork sandwich. I am sitting in her food truck on Mississippi Avenue. She is currently unconscious. You have exactly 1 hour to bring the journals containing your grandmother's proprietary formulas to the abandoned shipyards in St. John's. If you call the Portland Police Bureau, I will drain her dry and leave her hanging from the St. John's Bridge." The line clicked dead. Panic finally broke through Harper's rational armor. Chloe was innocent. She was just a chef trying to make rent, pulled into a supernatural turf war, because Harper hadn't asked enough questions about her sudden windfall. "I have to go," Harper said, grabbing her car keys from the floor. "He has Chloe. You are not going alone," Cassian ordered, stepping in front of her. "Graves will kill you both the second he has the journals. He cannot leave a surviving asset. Then what do we do?" Harper yelled, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "He's a monster. I'm a baker. I don't know how to fight vampires." "You don't need to fight them," Desmond interjected quietly, wiping the blood from his eye. "You just need to cook for them." Harper froze. An idea wild and incredibly dangerous began to form in her mind. She thought about the history on the whiteboard. She thought about her grandmother's meticulous warnings about substitutions. If the exact combination of iron, copper, and acid acts as a life-saving synthetic blood, what happens if I introduce a toxic element to the chemical bond? "Desmond Harper," said her voice, dropping to a serious, calculated pitch. "Is there a holistic pharmacy near here? One that's open 24 hours, or one you can break into? There is a naturopathic clinic in Hawthorne. I have the security codes," Desmond replied. "What do you need?" "Colloidal silver," Harper said. "The highest concentration they have, and I need to get back to the bakery." The preparation. They moved with militaristic speed. While Desmond raided the clinic, Cassian drove Harper's Subaru back to Quinn's Confections. Through the icy, desolate streets. They had 45 minutes. Inside the familiar warmth of her kitchen, Harper went to work. She didn't have time for the slow reduction process required for a full batch of jam, but she didn't need to feed an army. She only needed to feed Sebastian Graves. She threw the wild Oregon strawberries into the heavy copper pot, cranking the industrial gas burner to its maximum heat. She poured in the dark cherry balsamic, the acidic vinegar instantly reacting with the oxidized copper. But instead of adding the life-saving iron powder, she waited for Desmond. 10 minutes later, Desmond burst through the back door, slamming a large amber glass bottle onto the stainless steel prep table. Liquid colloidal silver, 500 ppm. In vampire lore, silver was a deadly neurotoxin, disrupting their cellular regeneration. If Cassian's theory about the tart tricking their biological receptors was correct, injecting medical-grade silver into the highly acidic, copper-reduced jam would create a Trojan horse. It would smell exactly like the synthetic blood, but upon ingestion, the silver would bind directly to their mutated cells. Harper whisked the silver into the boiling jam. The mixture hissed violently, turning a deep, unnatural shade of violet before settling back into a dark, blood-red gloss. She quickly filled 6 pre-baked tart shells, boxed them up, and grabbed her grandmother's weathered leather journal. The St. John's Showdown. The abandoned shipyards beneath the St. John's Bridge were a cathedral of rusting metal and shadows. The skeletal remains of old freight ships loomed in the freezing fog. Harper walked alone toward the center of the yard, carrying the pastry box and the journal. Cassian and Desmond were hidden in the darkness, flanking her position. "Right there is far enough, Miss Quinn," a voice echoed through the fog. Sebastian Graves stepped into the dim light of a flickering sodium street lamp. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy trench coat, his eyes glowing with that same terrifying crimson Harper had seen in Cassian. Beside him, 2 heavily tattooed enforcers held a bound and gagged Chloe, who was weeping silently. "The journal," Graves demanded, extending a pale hand. "Let her go first," Harper said, holding the leather book tightly against her chest. "And you don't just want the journal. You want the prototype. You need to know it actually works before you destroy it, right?" She set the bakery box on a rusted oil drum and flipped the lid open. The heavy metallic scent of the jam immediately hit the freezing air. Graves's nostrils flared. The physiological reaction was instantaneous. The scent of the copper-reduced acidic jam triggered the deep, predatory hunger in his brain. The deficit demanded to be fed. "Fascinating," Graves whispered. He moved with a speed that defied physics, suddenly standing right in front of the oil drum. He picked up one of the silver-laced tarts, inspecting the dark red glaze. "To think our entire evolutionary lineage could be subverted by a mortal with a whisk." He took a massive bite. His 2 enforcers, driven mad by the scent, grabbed the remaining tarts and devoured them. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Graves smiled mockingly at Harper. Then the chemistry kicked in. Graves let out a sound that was half gasp, half shriek. The veins on his neck bulged, turning a stark, venomous black, as the 500 ppm colloidal silver hit his bloodstream carried directly to his cells by the acidic copper reduction. He dropped to his knees, clutching his throat, thick black ichor spilling from his mouth. His enforcers collapsed instantly, seizing violently on the frozen concrete. "Cassian!" Harper screamed. Cassian dropped from the rusted rafters of a crane directly above them. He didn't waste time on theatrical speeches. With brutal calculated efficiency, he neutralized the incapacitated purist leader, permanently ending the threat to his syndicate. Desmond sprinted from the shadows, cutting Chloe's ties and shielding the women from the gruesome finale, the aftermath. By 600 a.m., the shipyards were completely sanitized by Mercer Vanguard's cleanup crew. Chloe, deeply traumatized but physically unharmed, was sitting in the back of Desmond's heated SUV, wrapped in a shock blanket. Harper stood near the edge of the river, watching the sunrise paint the Portland sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. Cassian walked up beside her, adjusting his cuffs. "Graves's faction will fracture without him," Cassian said quietly. "The threat is eliminated. You have saved my syndicate, Miss Quinn, and you have saved countless human lives in this city." "Chloe knows everything now," Harper said, exhausted to her bones. "I can't lie to her anymore. She is a chef, is she not?" Cassian asked, a faint, rare smile touching his pale lips. "My board of directors has decided to expand our operations. We are going to need more than 40 tarts a night if we are to supply the entire Pacific Northwest Territory. We will require an industrial facility and a sous chef." Harper looked at the billionaire vampire. She had started the year dodging eviction notices and crying over broken Hobart mixers. Now she was the exclusive, highly classified head of synthetic food production for an ancient society of apex predators. "We're going to need a lot more copper pots." Harper sighed finally, allowing herself to smile. Business, it turned out, was about to be very bloody good. If you found this descent into Portland's supernatural underworld as gripping as we did, smash that like button. Have you ever suspected a local business might be a front for something darker? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow true crime and paranormal thrill seekers, and hit subscribe for more unbelievable hidden stories from the shadows of reality. Stay curious, stay safe, and always check your jam.